What is that doing here? Clarice sneered, holding Lily's medical meal container between two fingers, like it was contaminated garbage. Before anyone could respond, she marched to the nearest trash can and dropped it in right in front of Lily's stunned face. The crowd went silent, but my voice cut through like a scalpel. That meal was medically prescribed. Are you aware you just violated federal disability law? What would you do if someone tossed your medically fragile child's food into the trash like it was garbage because they thought it clashed with their picnic aesthetic? How would you respond when that one cruel moment nearly sent your daughter to the emergency room? My name is Dr. Marcus Ellison. I'm the Director of Public Health Services for the county and the sole parent to the most resilient 15-year-old I know, my daughter Lily. We moved to Magnolia Springs, Oregon 3 months ago, drawn in by the promise of nature trails, vibrant community events, and flower-lined walkways that reminded Lily of her mom. My late wife Hannah adored flowers, hydrangeas in particular. After she passed 3 years ago, Lily and I honored her memory by planting a new flower bed every spring. Our home was always filled with petals and vases and fragrance, and when we saw Magnolia Springs' signature Summer Bloom Picnic listed on the neighborhood website, it felt like a sign, a fresh start. What we didn't know was that tucked beneath the hydrangeas and honeysuckle was a toxic weed named Clarice Thornwell. Clarice was the kind of woman who made elegance feel like a weapon, immaculately dressed with an always fresh French twist and pearls that never moved no matter how much she talked. And she talked a lot. She'd been HOA president of Magnolia Springs for the past 8 years, winning every term unopposed, not because people admired her, but because no one dared challenge her. Her rules were arbitrary, her standards oppressive, and her control absolute. If a daisy grew an inch beyond your property line, you got a violation notice. If your lawn chair wasn't porch harmonious, she'd leave a citation tucked under the seat. Still, I thought perhaps we'd find a way to coexist. Lily needed stability more than anything. Lily has ulcerative colitis, a chronic condition that affects her digestive system. Her diet isn't just a preference, it's a lifeline. No gluten, no dairy, no artificial preservatives or high FODMAP foods. Her meals are tailored down to the gram, prepared fresh daily, and packed in special containers, labeled with ingredients in case of emergency. She's never once complained. She's focused, funny, brilliant with computers, and has a strength I can't take credit for. Her condition is invisible to most, which is both a blessing and a curse. People assume she's being difficult or picky, when in reality a single contaminated bite could land her in the hospital. That's why when I saw the flyer for the Summer Bloom Picnic, I reached out immediately to the event coordinator to make sure we could bring her food. Rachel Flores, the coordinator, was warm and understanding. She had a child with severe allergies herself and knew the risks firsthand. Of course, Dr. Ellison, she said. Bring whatever Lily needs. We want her to enjoy herself just like everyone else. That reassurance meant the world to me and to Lily. She'd been so nervous about moving, about starting over, about making friends in a place where no one knew her story. The picnic felt like a step toward belonging. We spent the morning of the event preparing her meal together. Rosemary grilled chicken, roasted carrots, and her favorite lentil quinoa salad with lemon vinaigrette. She even decorated the container with daisy and sunflower stickers. Gotta make it picnic cute, she joked, though I could tell she was still anxious. You've got nothing to be ashamed of, I reminded her. Your body just needs different fuel. That's nothing to hide. She gave me that classic teenage eye roll, but I caught a smile tugging at her lips. The park was beautiful when we arrived. Rows of picnic tables circled beneath white canopies, string lights swayed gently in the breeze, and floral arrangements lined the paths, snapdragons, roses, and of course magnolias. It really did feel like something out of a painting. Families gathered in cheerful groups, children chased one another through a bubble maze, and a jazz trio played softly near the grill station. We picked a quiet table beneath a cherry tree and set Lily's meal down next to her cooler, which held her emergency meds and a hydration mix. I left her at the table and walked over to the potluck section to contribute our fruit tray and chat briefly with a few neighbors. That's when I met Robert, a local pharmacist and fellow public health advocate, and we struck up a casual conversation about upcoming school vaccine drives. It couldn't have been more than 10 minutes, but when I turned back toward our table, I noticed the commotion. A few heads had turned. A woman in heels far too thin for grass stood at Lily's table, holding the daisy-covered food container, between two fingers like it was infected. Clarice Thornwell. Absolutely not, she was saying, voice sharp and just loud enough to draw attention. This kind of thing has no place here. It disrupts the visual harmony. Lily, sitting in her chair, her face pale and stunned, tried to speak. That's my lunch. I have UC. We all have something these days, Clarice interrupted with a dismissive wave. But we also have standards. It's inconsiderate to bring food like this to a public celebration. Then with a theatrical wrinkle of her nose, she walked 3 steps to the nearest garbage bin and dropped Lily's container in without a moment's pause. The sound of plastic hitting metal cracked through me like a thunderclap. I was across the lawn in seconds. What do you think you're doing? I said, my voice cold but steady. Clarice turned, caught off guard by my sudden appearance. Dr. Ellison, she said, recovering quickly, just maintaining the aesthetic integrity of the event. That food didn't match the theme, and that food was medically prescribed. For my daughter. Who has a chronic illness? I said, every syllable deliberate. You just threw away a necessary meal. Do you have any idea what that means? Her lips pressed into a thin line. Surely she can manage with what's on the table. There are gluten-free cookies, and you are not a dietitian. You are not her doctor, and you are not entitled to endanger her health because of your obsession with appearances. A small crowd had begun to gather, silent but attentive. I turned to Lily, who sat stiffly, her hands clenched in her lap. Her cheeks burned with shame. Are you okay? I asked. She nodded barely. Just hungry, she whispered. That broke something in me. I turned back to Clarice. Let me introduce myself properly, I said. I'm Dr. Marcus Ellison, Director of Public Health for this county, the agency responsible for evaluating food safety and public health compliance at community events like this one. Her eyes widened ever so slightly. You may have just violated several ADA provisions by targeting my daughter's medically necessary diet. And as for throwing away someone else's food, that falls under health code violations, especially at a public gathering. Clarice opened her mouth, but no words came out. Rachel Flores stepped forward from the grill area, arms crossed, phone in hand. I approved their meal, she said flatly. They followed every protocol. You overstepped. Robert joined her. If you'd like to test the limits of what the health department can enforce, Clarice, I'd be happy to back Dr. Ellison's report. Around us, neighbors murmured their agreement. One woman said softly, that could have been my son. He has celiac. Clarice stood there, frozen still in pearls, still in heels, still trying to hold on to her crumbling authority. But it was already gone. The blossoms around us might have been curated, but nothing could cover up the ugliness that had just been revealed. I packed up what was left of our things, gently helped Lily to her feet, and we left the picnic behind. As we walked home, her fingers found mine and gave them the tiniest squeeze. That's when I knew no matter what Clarice Thornwell thought she could control, change had already begun to bloom. That night, as I sat beside Lily's bed, the steady hum of the IV machine was the only sound breaking the sterile silence of the emergency room. The same girl who decorated her lunchbox with sunflower stickers now lay curled up in a hospital gown, her body trembling from cramps and fever. Hours earlier, she had been hopeful, nervous, yes, but hopeful. She had worn her yellow cardigan, the one her mother gave her before she passed, and she had smiled at the idea of maybe making a new friend. But Clarice Thornwell's careless cruelty had shattered that hope, reducing Lily's carefully prepared meal to trash and turning a simple afternoon into a traumatic trigger. And now this an inflamed colon dehydration and stress-induced flare-up, all because someone couldn't tolerate the sight of a non-matching lunchbox. The irony wasn't lost on me. Clarice had tossed aside nourishment like it was offensive decor, but now her actions were a medical emergency. I reached for my phone to check the time, 2:11 a.m., when a message came through. Unknown number. Dr. Ellison, this is Colin Thornwell. I just heard what happened. I'm so sorry. Please let me help. I specialize in medical dietary planning, and I'm her son. I read it twice. Then again, Colin Thornwell. I remembered Rachel Flores mentioning Clarice had an adult son who'd moved out years ago and didn't come around much. She hadn't mentioned that he was a chef or that he clearly wanted nothing to do with his mother's oppressive reign over Magnolia Springs. I typed back, Emma is stable. She'll be okay. Thank you for reaching out. I may take you up on that offer. His reply came within seconds, whenever you're ready. By morning, Lily was discharged with medication fluids and instructions for bland, low-residue meals. She didn't speak much on the way home, just stared out the window as the sun peeked over the rooftops of the neighborhood that had already let her down. When we pulled into our driveway, something unexpected was waiting on the porch. 3 paper bags tied with twine labeled in neat handwriting, low FODMAP, dairy-free, gluten-free, packed with care. Next to them was a note. These won't replace what was lost, but maybe they'll remind Lily she's not alone. Signed, Colin. Inside were perfectly portioned meals, a turmeric chicken broth, mashed carrots and parsnips, and a light rice porridge with a touch of ginger. Not flashy, not aesthetic, just safe, thoughtful, necessary. Lily, still pale and weak, gave a small nod and whispered, "He gets it." Later that day, I called Rachel Flores. She was already furious. "I couldn't sleep," she said. "I kept thinking about your daughter sitting there just trying to eat, and Clarice treating her like a trash can. And the worst part, it wasn't the first time. That's when she dropped the real bombshell. I have video recordings from over 2 years' worth of events. She's done this before to kids with allergies, to seniors with insulin coolers, even to a family whose son uses a feeding tube. I never knew what to do with it before, but now I do." She sent me the footage. I watched clips of Clarice sneering at a girl's nut-free snack bag, berating a mother for ruining the dessert table aesthetic by labeling cupcakes with ingredient warnings, even mocking someone's inhaler lying on a picnic table. It was a pattern, a calculated, consistent pattern of ableism disguised as taste. I called my team at the health department and scheduled a surprise inspection of the HOA's food facilities. The community clubhouse where Clarice hosted most events doubled as a kitchen and storage space for bulk food. What we found stunned even me. Expired dry goods months out of date, open containers of allergens stored next to allergy-safe items, no logs for temperature control on refrigeration units, no separate utensils for gluten-free or allergen-friendly prep, no allergy warnings posted anywhere, and worst of all, no documented food handling certifications for any event volunteers. It was a ticking time bomb. The report came together fast. 3 pages of violations, 6 recommendations for immediate suspension of food services, and a formal notice posted on the clubhouse door by week's end. Effective immediately, Magnolia Springs HOA is prohibited from hosting any food-related events until full compliance with county health standards is achieved. The community reaction was swift and furious. At first, a few residents grumbled about government overreach, but that shifted fast when parents started sharing their own stories, how Clarice had dismissed their warnings, belittled their needs, and silenced their concerns. One mother recounted how her son broke out in hives after eating unlabeled pudding at the winter gala. A diabetic grandmother spoke about how Clarice forced her to sit in the shade so her glucometer wouldn't ruin the ambiance. A pattern emerged, and so did a movement. Neighbors who had never raised their voices began demanding accountability. And in the middle of it all, Colin reached out again, this time with an offer not of food, but partnership. "I don't speak to my mother anymore," he said when we met for coffee. "She thought my career was beneath her. That cooking for people with food sensitivities made me weak. But I think it makes me exactly the opposite." He showed me a portfolio of recipes he'd developed over the years. Adaptive meals for Crohn's colitis, celiac, and food allergies. People deserve to be safe, and they deserve to feel normal doing it. Your daughter deserves that. It was the first time someone outside our little circle had said that aloud. I told him about Lily's app, the one she'd been coding in private, a tool to help people with restricted diets find safe recipes, flag hidden allergens in common meals, and share tips for navigating potlucks, cookouts, and community events. "She calls it Bloom Safe," I said. After the picnic, she almost deleted it. "But now I think it's exactly what this neighborhood needs." Colin smiled. "Let me know when you want help building the recipe database." The following Monday, I received an official invitation to a special HOA emergency meeting with one line in bold near the top: "Board member Clarice Thornwell will be addressing the community regarding recent events." My phone vibrated again. It was Rachel. "You should come early," she said. "This one's going to be full." As I hung up, I looked over at Lily, sitting cross-legged on the floor, working quietly on her laptop. She looked up at me. "Are they actually going to do something about her?" I nodded. Yes, and you helped make that happen. She gave a small, tired smile. Good, because it's not just about me anymore. It's about all of us. What started as a picnic had turned into something much larger. The flowers of Magnolia Springs had always looked beautiful from a distance, but now beneath the blossoms, real roots of change were beginning to grow. And Lily's voice, once quiet, once dismissed, was leading the way. The Magnolia Springs Community Center was packed by the time Lily and I arrived for the emergency HOA meeting. Every folding chair was taken, and neighbors stood shoulder to shoulder along the walls. People who rarely left their porches were now showing up in person, their expressions tight with anticipation. You could feel the shift in the air, like something brittle had finally cracked open, and people were no longer willing to stay silent. The HOA board sat at a long table beneath a banner of hydrangeas and magnolias, the very flowers Clarice Thornwell used to control with her clipboard, and a passive-aggressive smile. But tonight Clarice wasn't in control. She wasn't even seated at the board table. Instead, she sat alone in the back row, clutching a navy folder in her lap, her usual pearl earrings replaced with small studs, her hair not as tightly wound as usual. Even her posture was different, smaller, diminished, uncertain. The board chair, William Harwood, a retired circuit court judge known for his no-nonsense style, tapped his gavel and called the meeting to order. Before we begin tonight's agenda, he said in his deep, measured voice, "Mrs. Thornwell has requested a personal statement to the community." That alone drew murmurs from the room. Clarice hadn't spoken publicly since the incident. She slowly stood, walked toward the podium, and adjusted the microphone with hands that trembled slightly. "Good evening," she began. Her voice was low, controlled, but lacked the razor-edge confidence we'd all come to associate with her. "I'm not going to stand here and pretend I didn't make mistakes. I did. I made many. And what happened at the Summer Bloom picnic wasn't just a misjudgment, it was a failure. A failure of empathy, of leadership, of basic human decency." She paused, scanning the room, but no one interrupted. She looked directly at Lily, who sat beside me holding the edge of her laptop bag like a lifeline. "Lily Ellison, I owe you the deepest apology. I treated your needs as an inconvenience. I violated your rights and I embarrassed you in front of your neighbors. And for that I am truly sorry." The silence that followed was thick, heavy with things unsaid. Then Clarice did something that no one expected. She opened the navy folder and pulled out a check. Effective immediately, she continued, "I am resigning as HOA president, and I'm donating $5,000 of my own funds to support new initiatives that promote inclusion, disability awareness, and food safety in Magnolia Springs." That got a response. A few gasps, a handful of surprised whispers. Clarice stepped down from the podium and returned to her seat, her eyes fixed on the floor. William Harwood nodded, cleared his throat, and turned the page in front of him. "Thank you, Mrs. Thornwell. The board accepts your resignation, and we acknowledge your contribution. Now on to the matter of community reform." That was my cue. I stood up and walked toward the projector, nodding briefly at Rachel Flore, who gave me a small, encouraging smile. I loaded my presentation, a 20-minute breakdown of the county's food safety requirements, ADA compliance policies, and community best practices for inclusive events. It wasn't flashy, but it was clear. Accessible kitchens, ingredient labeling, pre-approved dietary accommodations, cross-contamination protocols, allergy signage at every event, and most importantly, education. Training sessions for volunteers, outreach for families with special needs, and a standing advisory committee to ensure that this never happened again. By the time I finished, the energy in the room had changed from anger to momentum. People clapped. They raised their hands with questions. They offered to join the new food committee, the accessibility task force, the inclusion council. Rachel Flores was elected HOA president by unanimous vote. "It's about time," someone muttered from the back, to soft laughter and applause. The next few months were a whirlwind. The community kitchen was gutted and renovated to meet health department standards. New storage systems were installed, complete with color-coded bins and temperature-controlled shelving. Ingredient checklists were printed and laminated. Volunteers underwent food handler certification. But perhaps the most powerful change was cultural. For the first time, families started asking, not just, "What are we serving?" but "Who are we serving?" Every event flyer now included a dietary disclosure section. RSVP cards asked about allergies. Kids started showing up to potlucks with proudly labeled safe snack bags. And at the heart of it all was Lily. She had thrown herself into finishing the app she'd almost deleted BloomSafe. It started as a directory for allergy-friendly meals and evolved into a full-platform dietary profiles, restaurant filters, a symptom tracker, even a social forum for teens living with chronic conditions. She met with Colin twice a week, developing recipes, writing code, and testing user interfaces. He showed her how to modify classic comfort foods into medically safe alternatives. She showed him how to gamify meal planning for kids who hated feeling different. They were an unlikely pair, but a powerful one. By March, the community had planned its first ever Spring Bloom Health Fair, a full-day event dedicated to wellness, inclusion, and education. There were cooking demonstrations, medical Q&As, dietitian panels, and booths from local nonprofits. The centerpiece, however, was the public launch of BloomSafe. Lily stood on a stage decorated with tulips and lavender, dressed in a green shirt that read, "Not a burden, just different." She clicked the remote and her app came to life on the big screen. "This is for anyone who's ever been told they didn't belong at the table," she said, "and for the people who are finally ready to make a bigger one." At the end of her presentation, as people clapped and lined up to download the app, Lily spotted someone lingering near the flower wall in the back, Clarice Thornwell. She was dressed simply, no pearls, no clipboard, holding a cup of herbal tea like a peace offering. Lily walked over. I watched from a distance, ready to step in if needed, but I didn't have to. They spoke for several minutes, and then Lily did something that made me blink in disbelief. She handed Clarice her phone. Clarice looked surprised, tapped the screen a few times, and then nodded slowly. Later, when we were packing up, I asked Lily what that was about. "She's going to beta test the app," Lily said casually. "She knows a lot about organizing events and presentation, and she's trying to reconnect with her son. This gives them something to work on together." I raised an eyebrow. Lily shrugged. "She messed up, but she's trying. People can be more than one thing, Dad." That evening, we sat on the porch with the scent of spring blossoms in the air, watching neighbors we once barely knew wave as they passed. Lily was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked, "Do you think if this hadn't happened, if she hadn't thrown away my food, any of this would have changed?" I thought about it. About the trauma, the confrontation, the aftermath. And then I looked at her, strong, focused, compassionate, and now a catalyst for something so much bigger than herself. Sometimes, I said, it takes one thoughtless act to reveal what's been broken all along. And sometimes one brave person's response is what helps fix it. She smiled faintly. "I guess even the worst people can help something beautiful grow." I nodded. "Even discarded petals can become compost. You just gave this place new soil." And with that, Lily leaned her head on my shoulder, and Magnolia Springs at long last bloomed. In every community, behind the trimmed hedges and blooming flower beds, there are people quietly carrying burdens others can't see. Chronic illness, food allergies, invisible disabilities, they don't come with signs or warnings. That's why today's story isn't just about a discarded lunchbox. It's about dignity. It's about what happens when we let superficial standards take priority over human compassion, and it's a reminder of how one act of exclusion can ignite powerful change. Lily Ellison's journey shows us the deep emotional and physical toll that a lack of understanding can have. For her, eating wasn't about preference, it was survival. But to Clarice Thornwell, a community leader more concerned with aesthetics than empathy, Lily's food was nothing more than an eyesore. That decision, thoughtless, cruel, and entirely avoidable, sent Lily to the emergency room. But it also woke up a community that had been silent for far too long. And here's the lesson: when we center our rules, traditions, or preferences over another person's safety or humanity, we are no longer leading, we're excluding. True leadership requires listening. Inclusion requires effort. And growth only comes when we admit we've fallen short and choose to do better. What makes this story powerful is that the resolution didn't come from revenge, it came from responsibility. From Dr. Ellison's calm but firm response. From Rachel Flores stepping forward with truth. From neighbors who began to speak up. From Colin Thornwell, who offered healing where his mother caused harm. And yes, even from Clarice, who despite her many failings, ultimately chose humility over pride. But perhaps the most powerful example came from Lily, a 15-year-old girl who, after being humiliated in front of her peers, didn't retreat into silence. She turned her experience into purpose. She created something that could help not just her, but countless others who felt unseen or unsafe at the table. That's courage. That's leadership. So here's our encouragement to you. Be the person who makes room at the table. Ask questions, make accommodations, speak up when someone is excluded, even if it's uncomfortable. And remember, small acts of inclusion can blossom into community-wide transformation. Thank you for watching today's story on Us Justice Stories. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of someone in your own life who's been overlooked, we invite you to share it. Your voice can help educate, inspire, and build empathy one story at a time. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful, instructive stories rooted in real-life justice. We're grateful you're part of this journey. Together, we're not just telling stories, we're planting seeds of change.